Hello friends, so today we are going to discuss a very important topic in orthodontics, which is your removable and fixed appliances. So a lot of questions can be expected from this chapter and most of them will be a picture based question. So the general pattern of asking questions from this chapter is very high because last 2 years if you check with the question papers, you can see that around 14 marks, in that at least 7 to 8 marks questions were from appliances, which are mostly picture based questions by giving the photographs or pictures of the appliance and asking you to identify which appliance is this. So this chapter is extremely important in orthodontics. So the references of it can be either Balaji or you can go for Profit and also Graeber. So we will begin with the basic appliance components used in the removable appliances. So the first we will be dealing about the circumferential clasp. Most of you have made this in your preclinical exercises, so you will know how it looks like, how it is fabricated, everything. But we will just quickly refresh through it. So this is fabricated using 0.9 millimeter wire. It's also called as C clasp or 3/4 clasp, and it is used to engage the buccocervical undercut. And one of the drawbacks of the circumferential clasp is that it cannot be used in partially erupted tooth. So now the next important one is the Jackson's clasp. Again, it is fabricated using 0.9 millimeter wire. It is also called as full clasp or U clasp. So this engages the both buccocervical undercuts of a posterior tooth, and one of the advantages is that it is very simple in design and offers adequate retention. But again, it's not useful in partially erupted tooth. So both C clasp, that is the circumferential clasp, as well as the Jackson clasp is not offering any adequate retention in partially erupted tooth. Both are made from 0.9 millimeter wires and both engages the buccocervical undercuts. Now coming to Adams clasp. So Adams clasp is one called as universal clasp, Liverpool clasp, modified arrowhead clasp. So as we all know, Adams clasp is one of the most widely used retention clasp in most of the removable appliances. This is actually derived from Crossat clasp. So Crossat clasp was the forerunner of Adams clasp, and Adams clasp has got three parts. One is your bridge, then you have got two arrowheads which engages the undercuts, and then you have the retention tags or retention arms which is extending to the palatal or lingual region. Now there are certain specifications with regarding to the fabrication of the Adams clasp. The first important thing is that the bridge will be 2/3 the mesial distance of the tooth. So all these clasp, most of you have done it in your preclinical exercises as well as your appliance fabrications. So you will be knowing all the specifications. So when you're preparing an Adams clasp, you will always go for the bridge length at 2/3 of the mesiodistal width of the tooth, and angulation of this bridge is at 45 degrees. And one more important thing is that this is made use of 0.7 millimeter wire or 22 gauge wire. So previously when we were discussing circumferential clasp and Jackson's clasp, we were telling they were made of 0.9 millimeter wire, whereas Adams clasp is made up of 0.7 millimeter wire, and this one has got much more advantages compared to your C clasp. So following are the advantages of your Adams clasp. One is that it's a very small, neat and obstructive clasp, and it occupies only a minimum space, and it is rigid and offers excellent retention, and this can be used in any tooth in the arch, that is your posteriors as well as modified can be used on your anteriors, partially erupted, completely erupted. And one more thing is that if Adams clasp is broken, it can be repaired by soldering, and it can be further modified according to your tooth, that is if the last tooth is like if it is partially erupted, or you can go for single Adams clasp, distal extension of the Adams clasp with helix. So many modifications are possible in the design of the Adams clasp according to your cases. And one of the drawbacks of the Adams clasp is that the extensive wire bending, it will incorporate stresses in the wire, so the chances of breakage is greater in an Adams clasp. But the advantages are that it is very small, neat and occupies minimal space, retention will be well, and also it can be used on any tooth in the arch, and can be provided for soldering and also permits modifications in the design. Now, a modification of Adams clasp, which is designed by William J. Clark, is called as your delta clasp, which is used in your twin block appliances. So, this again engages the interdental undercuts, just like your Adams clasp. And how do you adjust this clasp? So, please look at the picture and note the difference between the delta clasp and the Adams clasp. There is a helical portion. And how do you adjust the delta clasp is that you hold the retentive loop, that is the retention tags which is extending into your acrylic plate. You hold the retentive loop and twist it inwards. So that is one method of adjusting or tightening a delta clasp. The other one is bending towards the interdental undercut as it emerges from the acrylic. So the portion which emerges from the acrylic, it is bent towards your interdental region. That is one way of adjusting the Adams clasp, or either by holding the retentive loops or the retentive tags and twisting it inwards. So one clasp, most of the clasp we have discussed so far is mostly used in your posterior teeth, whether it may be your C clasp, Jackson or Adams, or again your delta clasp. Most of this is used in your posterior teeth. Now, one clasp that can be used in the anterior teeth is your south end clasp. So, it actually spans between the adjacent margins of your anterior teeth. It's made use of 0.7 millimeter wire. So, please remember your Adams clasp was also made use of 0.7 mm wire, whereas C clasp and Jackson's clasp were made use of 0.9 mm wire. Now, southern clasp is like, how do you adjust it? It is by readapting into the interdental area. So that is how you adjust a south end clasp. So please look at the picture and make sure that you will be able to identify a south end clasp. And other advantage of this clasp is that it is aesthetically more pleasing. There are no extensive loops or arrowheads or any retentive tags that are projecting into your sulcus region. It is actually adapting well into the margins of the anterior teeth. So that's why it is more aesthetically pleasing and more suitable for your anterior tooth. So we have seen so far the important retentive components of the removable appliances, that is your clasp. Now we are discussing about bite planes. So bite planes, the first one is your anterior bite plane, which is created as a platform behind your upper incisor teeth. So the height of the bite plane should be sufficient to separate the posterior teeth by 1.5 to 2 mm. So, and one more thing, these bite planes are used for the correction of the overbite or deep bite of the anterior teeth. So, when the lower incisors are coming in contact with this bite planes, the bite will be opening in the posterior region by 1 to 1.5 to 2 mm, which causes the supra eruption of your posterior teeth and thereby helps in the bite opening. So that is what is the working principle of an anterior bite plane, and the minimum opening that is required for the correction of the bite should be 1.5 to 2 mm. So that should be the height of the bite plane. That is, it should create a space between the posterior teeth around 1.5 to 2 mm. So your anterior bite plane usually is a flat platform behind your upper incisors, whereas swept bite plane is a modification where there is an anterior inclined bite plane. So the platform behind the incisors won't be flat, but rather it will be slightly inclined, as well as there will be an acrylic capping which is extended to your incisal edges of the anterior teeth. So this was introduced by Wed in 1944. Since there is an incisal capping in this appliance, in this bite plane, there is an incisal capping. This helps the pressure to be transmitted along the long axis of the tooth. So there is a axial transmission of the force. So please look at the picture. You can see that in the upper central incisor, we are seeing a P2, a line which is indicating the line of action. So the incisal capping helps the force to be transmitted along the line of axis, and this is especially useful to provide a distal force to the maxillary teeth, and that helps in reinforcing the anchorage of the tooth. So also this is suitable in growing individuals. So sweat bite plane is nothing but there is an inclined bite plane with an extension of acrylic capping to your incisal edges, which helps the pressure to be transmitted axially, that is through the long axis of the teeth, and helps to reinforce the anchorage, and hence it is ideal in growing individuals. Instead of giving your conventional bite plane, you can go for a sweat bite plane in case of growing individuals for the correction of your bite, correction of your bite, that is correction of your deep bite, as well as the retraction of your incisor teeth, upper incisor teeth. Now, so far we have been discussing about your anterior bite plane, your inclined bite plane with modifications, that is your sweat bite plane. Now we are talking about your posterior bite plane. So posterior bite plane, just as the name suggests, we are keeping a bite plaque over your posterior teeth. So this is actually used in the correction of anterior crossbite. So don't get confused, like anterior bite plane is used in the correction of deep bite, doesn't mean that your posterior bite plane is used for the correction of the posterior malocclusion. In fact, it is actually used for the correction of your anterior crossbite. Please note, it is your anterior crossbite, not even your posterior crossbite. So don't get confused like that or just jump into any answers just by looking at the question. So always remember, the posterior bite plane is used for the correction of your anterior crossbite. And one more thing is that in the manufacturing or in the fabrication of the posterior bite plate, it should be wide enough to contact both the cusp, that is both the buccal and palatal cusp of your posterior teeth. So this has got a displacing activity of the mandible. The mandible will be getting displaced, and hence it will helps to correct in case of anterior crossbites. So it's not only in the upper arch, you can give bite planes in the lower arch as well. So this lower inclined bite plane, which is also known as your Catalan's appliances, because it was Catalan who designed this appliance more than 200 years ago. This is actually again used in the correction of anterior crossbite. So for the correction of the anterior crossbite, so far we have seen your posterior bite plane and lower inclined plane, that is which is also called as Catalan's appliance. So this bite plane, it's at a 45-degree angulation to your occlusal plane. It is an inclined bite plane and it is at an angulation of 45 degree to your occlusal plane. And one more important thing in case of a lower inclined plane, that it should not be given not more than for 6 weeks. So 6 weeks is roughly around your 1.5 months. It should not be given more than for 1.5 months or 6 weeks, because it might result in anterior open bite, because the upper incisors which are in the crossbite will be guided into a more labial position using these appliances. But if it is used beyond a period of 6 weeks or 1.5 months, what happens is that there will be a tendency for anterior open bite to develop. So now let's talk about the active components in a removable appliances. The first one is your labial bow with U-loop. So this is made of 0.7 mm wire or 22 gauge wire, and the flexibility of this labial bow depends upon the vertical height of your U-loops, which are given in case of a labial bow. And it is actually used only in case of minor overjet correction or incisor alignment cases. So not in complicated cases, it is just useful or beneficial in cases of minor overjet reduction or incisor alignment cases. So apart from your conventional short labial bows, you have long labial bows where when it is required for space closure between the canines and the premolars. So the U-loop in such cases will be passing between your canine and premolar and will be extending, the retention tags will be extending distals to your premolars. So this is used for the correction or when you require to control the canine as well, and also in cases of retention, that is your post-treatment retention appliance. So now look at this picture. This is Mills bow, or it is also called as extended labial bow. So for exam point of view, most of the time they will ask you some complicated labial bows or labial bows which you're not using conventionally. The chances are very less that they will give you a picture of a long labial bow or short labial bow and then they will ask you to identify the appliances. No, most of the time they will go for this complicated labial bows or special labial bows. So the first one we are discussing here is your Mills bow, which is also called as your extended labial bow. So as you can see, it is having extensive loops and extensions, which will help in case of increased flexibility. So this increased flexibility helps in a retraction of severe overjet and also in the alignment of irregular incisors. So this is actually made of 0.7 mm wire, just like the case of your long labial bow or short labial bow, but the design is very complicated and has numerous loops or extensions, which helps to increase the flexibility, so more or larger overjet can be corrected using your Mills bow or extended labial bow. And it can also be used in cases, that is in mixed dentition cases where the canines are not erupted. Then you can go for the use of your Mills bow, unlike your conventional labial bows. But the drawback of this appliance is that since there are extensive loops, it causes discomfort to the patient. Now another modified labial bow is your high labial bow with apron spring. So in this design there will be a heavy base arch wire with which we are creating a high labial bow, and it is made of 0.9 mm wire. So your Mills bow was made of 0.7 mm wire. Again your long and short labial bows are also made use of 0.7 mm wire. But when high labial bow with apron spring is constructed, your labial bow is made up of a heavy base arch wire of 0.9 mm, whereas the apron spring, that is the spring which is wound around your high labial bow, it is made up of 0.3 to 0.4 mm wire. So this extensive design will helps in the correction of teeth with severe proclination, because using apron spring, that apron spring is very thin in dimension, so it has got a greater flexibility and helps in correction of severe proclination, and there is a long range of action. But the drawback of this appliance is that it is not well tolerated by the patient, because there is so much extension into your vestibular sulcus area, so it's not well tolerated by the patient. And another thing, it cannot be used in patients with shallow sulcus, and it is since the wire benting or the manufacturing of this high labial bow with apron spring is quite complicated, the fabrication of these appliances, it takes a lot of time. Now another labial bow or modification is your Roberts retractor, which is a flexible bow constructed using 0.5 mm wire. So just note here that the flexibility of the wire will be increased as the wire dimensions are getting, the diameter of the wire is getting reduced, because your short labial bow and your long labial bow was made of 0.7 mm wire, whereas the Roberts retractor is made use of your 0.5 mm wire. So when you are reading all these things, try to remember what we have learned in the biomechanics and orthodontics about the material properties, how changing the diameter of the wire, how much the differences, like how the cantilever dimensions, how much they will alter your strength, your flexibility and everything. So try to correlate all these things and try to learn this. So when we were discussing about the labial bow, we have noticed one thing, that is your Mills labial bow was made of complex loops design, but this increasing the loops actually increases the flexibility of the labial bow, and hence it is useful for the retraction of severe overjet. Same is the case with Roberts retractor. Here we are reducing the diameter of the wire. We are not adding so much complexities in the wire bending, but rather we are reducing the diameter of the wire, so that will make it more flexible. It will give a long range of action, and hence it is again useful for correction of severe overjet. Since the wire dimension is a little bit reduced here, we will always give a steel tubing to support this labial bow, that is your Roberts retractor, and a coil will be placed at the point of emergence from this steel tubing. So that's all about Roberts retractor. Please remember one thing, that the wire dimension is very much reduced compared to your conventional labial bow, and hence its flexibility is increased. And please note the design of the Roberts retractor, how much it is different from your conventional labial bows. And also sometimes the picture will show a steel tubing, like instead of the U-loop region there will be a steel tubing that is to support the Roberts retractor, and the coil is placed at the point of emergence of the wire from the steel tubing. Now, a fitted labial bow. So, as the name suggests, the fitted labial bow will be very well adapted to the labial surface of your anterior tooth, and it is made of 0.7 mm wire, and this is mainly used as a post retention appliance. That is, after your conventional orthodontic treatment using braces, post retention phase, the fitted labial bow is advised. And the drawback of this appliance is that it is very time consuming, because that has to closely adapt to the labial surface of your anterior tooth. Now, another different labial bow which if you have not conventionally used is your Beck's retention bow. So this Beck's retention bow, please look at the picture and understand the difference of it from your conventional short and long labial bows. Here, there is the distal extension of the labial bow is distal to the last erupted molar. So most probably it is your second molar or sometimes your third molars. But the retention tags of this labial bow is extending distal to your last erupted third molar. Last erupted molar. So why this labial bow or Beck's retention bow is significant is because, as you can see on the picture on the right side, there is no need of any additional retentive clasp when you are giving a Beck's retention bow. So what happens is that there is no interfering tags extending across the occlusal surface. In conventional Hawley's plate, you have to give you a labial bow and then you are giving an Adams clasp. So most of the time this Adams clasp will cause an occlusal interference. But in case of a Beck's retention bow, there is no occlusal interference caused by a retention clasp. Rather, the retention tags of the labial bow is extending distal to the last erupted molar. So what happens is that when you are doing a fixed orthodontic therapy, after removal of all the brackets and arch wires, then you will give a Beck's retention bow, and since there is no occlusal interferences caused by any retentive clasp, that will allow for the settling of the occlusion. Settling of occlusion means at the end of the fixed orthodontic treatment, most of the time the premolars may not be properly erupted into occlusion, or the molars may not be properly erupted into the occlusion. So once you give the Beck's retention bow, within 3-4 months there will be the molars and the premolars, they will erupt furthermore and they will settle into that occlusion. So that is the advantages of using a Beck's retention bow compared to your conventional Hawley's appliance after your orthodontic treatment. So we are hereby concluding our discussion on the labial bows. So before we are beginning with the springs, I have to make a point that when you are going through the labial bows, most of the time, since we are giving an online exam, the picture based questions are most probable from this section. And they are not going to ask you a very simple short labial bow or a Hawley's appliance or anything. So go for this complicated labial bows or the labial bows which you do not make conventionally. That includes your Mills labial bow, your high labial bow with apron spring, then your Roberts retractor and the Beck's retention bow. So these are not something that you or UG students usually make or try where they used to give for their patients. So since the chances of you people getting acquainted with it is less, so most probably the examiners will go for asking questions based on these labial bows which are not conventionally used. So please try to remember or try to understand how a Mills labial bow will look like, how a high labial bow with apron spring will look like, and also note the wire dimensions at which these labial bows are made of. Now let's talk about springs, which are other active components. So for a single cantilever spring, there will be 3 parts. You have one active arm, then there is a retentive arm, and then there is a coil portion. So that is the basic structure of a single cantilever spring. You have an active arm, you have a coil, and then you have a retentive arm. So mostly these springs are made of 0.5 to 0.6 millimeter wire, and the coil will have an internal diameter of 3 millimeters. So when you're going through springs as well as any other appliances, it's extremely important that you have an idea about what are the dimensions of the wire used for the fabrication of that particular appliance or that active component. And for single cantilever spring, the wire dimension is 0.5 to 0.6 millimeters, and the size of the coil will be a diameter of 3 millimeters. And this single cantilever spring is used to move the teeth labiolingually or mesiodistally. So both directions they can be used. Please look at the picture on the right side, bottom right side. That is used to move the tooth labiolingually. Whereas the picture at the top right corner, it is showing the tooth movement in a mesiodistal direction using a single cantilever spring. Now, double cantilever spring, it's also called as Z spring. This is used for the labial movement of the anterior teeth. So that is for proclination of the incisors. Now, the components of a double cantilever spring are similar to a single cantilever spring. Will be an active arm, there will be a coil, and then there will be a retentive arm. So, here the spring should be perpendicular to the palatal surface of the tooth. Otherwise, what happens is that it tends to cause the intrusion of the teeth. So that is why the spring should be perpendicular to the palatal surface of the tooth. Now coming to the activation of a double cantilever spring or Z spring, it is activated by opening both the coils. So at around 2 to 3 mm at a time, both the coils are opened, so which will allows the activation of the springs, and the Z spring is used to bring about labial movement or a proclination of the incisors. So we have Z spring for the labial movement of your incisors, whereas for the labial movement or buccal movement of the premolars and molars, we have T spring. So far we have spring, the single cantilever spring or finger spring, which is used for the mesiodistal movement of a tooth, the Z spring, which is used for the labial movement of your incisors, and T spring, which is used for the labial movement or buccal movement of your molars and premolars. Again, this is constructed using 0.5 mm wire. So when we were discussing about the removable appliances, so far you might have noticed it already that the springs are made up of wires of very less dimensions. So why it is so? This is because the reducing the dimension of the wire, which actually increases the flexibility of the wire and also gives a long range of action. So hence the springs, which are very active components in removable appliances, are constructed using wires of very less dimension. And the activation of the T spring, which is used for the buccal movement of your posterior teeth, the activation is by pulling the spring away from your base plate. So that causes the activation of the spring and brings about the buccal movement of your premolars and molars. Now coming to canine retractors. So canine retractors are a special group of springs which are used to bring about the distal movement of the canines. So they can be classified as based on the location, that is where these retractors or the springs are placed. It can be a buccal or palatal. Then one method of classification is based on the presence of a helix or a loop, whether the retractor is employing a helix or whether it is using a loop mechanism to bring about the distal movement of the canine. And third one is based on the mode of action, whether it is a push type or a pull type canine retractor. So based on the location, the canine retractors can be of two types, buccal and palatal. So first one is your buccal canine retractors. So buccal canine retractors are used for the distal and palatal movement of canines, which are buccally placed and which are placed highly in the vestibule. So here in the fabrication of this appliance, the helix or the coil will be always placed distal to the long axis of the canine. So the canine is supposed to, like we are placing this appliance to move the canine distally. So the force of action will be always distal to the long axis of the canine. Hence the coil or the helix will be always distal to the long axis of the tooth. Now the picture here shows a self-supported canine retractor which are made of 0.7 millimeter wire. There is another variation to this canine retractor, which is a buccal supported canine retractors, which are made up of a more flexible wire of 0.5 millimeters, but they lack stability, so they will be enclosed in a stainless steel tubing. But they can go for more range of activation. For a self-supported canine retraction, the activation can be only up to 1 millimeter at a time, whereas for a supported canine retractor, the activation can be up to 2 millimeters at a time. Now, a reverse loop canine retractor, which is also called as a helical canine retractor. Now, the indication of this retractor is patients with a shallow sulcus, especially in the mandibular arch. And how you activate this appliance is either you can cut off 1 millimeter from the free end and readapt this appliance, or it is by opening the coil. Now, there can be 1 mm of activation at a time. Now, the third category of your canine retractor is your U-loop buccal canine retractor, which is again used in shallow sulcus. And how you activate it is by the cutting off the free end and then readapting it. So far we have seen buccal canine retractors, reverse loop canine retractor, which are used in shallow sulcus, especially in the mandibular arch. And third category is your U-loop buccal canine retractor. Again, it is also used in shallow sulcus, and the activation is by cutting off the free end and readaptation. So far we have been seeing or discussing about buccal canine retractors. Now we will see the palatal canine retractors. So palatal canines are retractors are used for distal and buccal movement of the canines, which are placed buccally. So please look at the picture and understand the basic design of the palatal canine retractor. You have an active arm, a coil and a retentive arm. The active arm is placed mesial to the canine. So active arm is placed mesial to the canine, and there is a coil of 3 mm diameter which will be placed between the initial and final position of the canine. And the activation of the palatal canine retractor is by opening the helix at around 2 millimeters at a time. So palatal canine retractors is used for distal and buccal movement of a palatally placed canine. It has an active arm which is placed mesial to the canine, and there is a coil of 3 mm diameter which is placed between the initial and final position of the canine. And the activation of the palatal canine retractor is by opening the helix at 2 millimeters at a time. So far we have seen the different components of a removable appliances. So before moving to fixed appliances, there is one more topic to be discussed, which is your lip bumper or lip shield. So this is actually a combined removable fixed appliances that is acting like a modified vestibular screen. So the appliance can be used in both maxilla and mandible to shield the lip away from the tooth. So that is the purpose of using a lip bumper or a lip shield. It actually shields your lips away from the tooth. So it can be used for the interception of the lip sucking habits, and also it's used in cases of hyperactive mentalis activity. So it eliminates the persistent hyperactivity of the mentalis muscle, and it also shields the lips away from the dentition. So it is used for the interception of the lip sucking habit or thumb sucking habit, and this thereby also by shielding the teeth away from the influences of the surrounding soft tissue. It also helps to augment the anchorage and also for distalization of the first molars, also as space regainers following the early loss of the deciduous molars. So these are the following purposes of using a lip bumper or a lip shield. First, the foremost one is it eliminates the persistent hyperactivity of the mentalis muscle, and it also helps as a habit breaking appliances. It is used for the interception of lip sucking or digit sucking habit. Then it can augment the anchorage and also can be used for the distalization of the first molars, and finally as space regainers following the early loss of your deciduous molars. So this lip bumper or lip shield is primarily used in the lower arch. As you can see in the picture, it's mostly used in the lower arch, but if it is used for the maxillary arch, then it is a Denholz appliance. So Denholz appliance is basically a lip bumper which is used for the maxillary arch. Now, with regard to the anchorage considerations with respect to removable appliances, the anchorage is provided by the acrylic base plate and the dentition, and the acrylic base plate should be as thin as possible, not more than 2 mm, and it should be closely adapted to your palatal or lingual surfaces of the arch, and it should be extended as far as posteriorly so as to obtain a necessary anchorage. And the lower base plate, so the lower base plate will be U-shaped and it will be relatively thicker than your upper base plate. And the shallow lingual surfaces, so some patients will have shallow lingual surfaces, so they can be reinforced by a stainless steel wire or bar. So basically the anchorage in case of removable appliances is obtained from the base plate, which might be extending to the palate or the lingual sulcus region on the lower arch. So this base plate should be closely adapted and it should be as thin as possible and it should extend as far as possible. So these three things should be there. It should be closely adapted, it should extend as far as posteriorly as possible, and it should be closely adapted, and it should be thin, like it should be not more than 2 millimeters in thickness. And the lower base plate is U-shaped and it can be reinforced by a stainless steel wire or a bar. So now we are moving to discuss about fixed appliances. So in fixed appliances, the most important component is your brackets. So among brackets, the first one we are dealing with is your edgewise type of bracket, which is used in your edgewise technique as well as your straightwire technique. And look at the picture, you can see that the slot here is horizontal and it is facing labially. So for edgewise brackets, the horizontal slot will be facing labially, and it is a rectangular slot, and the most commonly used slot size is 018 into 028. So 018 into 028 is the rectangular slot size most commonly used in case of a edgewise appliance, where the horizontal slot of the bracket, it is facing labially. So one of the advantages of this edgewise brackets is that it provides a greater control over the tooth movement and do not permit the tipping of the tooth. So this is the advantage of an edgewise bracket. It has a greater control over the tooth movement because the slot here is running horizontally. And one more thing is that it doesn't permit the tipping of the tooth. So unlike the edgewise brackets where the slot is facing horizontally, here in ribbon arch brackets the slot is vertically, that is in an occlusogingival direction, and also the slot size is very narrow mesiodistally. So in a ribbon arch bracket we don't use a rectangular wire, we are going to use a round wire, and it is used in tooth movement, that is the tipping of the tooth in labiolingual as well as mesiodistal direction. It's suitable to go for a ribbon arch brackets. So important thing that you have to understand is that when you are given a picture of a bracket and ask you to identify the bracket, you should look for the slot, whether it is facing labially or whether it is facing occlusally. So if it is facing labially, it is mostly an edgewise bracket, whereas in ribbon arch brackets the slot will be facing gingivally, and the slot will be narrow mesiodistally, and the ribbon arch brackets can tolerate only round wires, and it is used mainly in the tipping of the teeth in the labiolingual or mesiodistal direction. So it's more suitable for tipping tooth movement, whereas edgewise brackets were very suitable for your bodily movement. So the aesthetic demand in treatment has led to the innovation or invention of ceramic brackets. So ceramic brackets, they are made of aluminum oxide or zirconium oxide. So look at the picture, you can easily identify a ceramic brackets which is more or less matching to your tooth structure, and it is highly aesthetic. So that is the major advantage of a ceramic bracket, which is made of aluminum oxide or zirconium oxide. But there are certain drawbacks. So whatever comes at the cost of good looking won't offer you enough strength or mechanical properties. So these brackets, the ceramic brackets, they are extremely brittle and they can fracture or crack when undue forces or when heavy forces are applied. And also, to compensate for this brittleness, their size can be increased, but which actually increases the bulk of these brackets. And third and major disadvantage advantage of ceramic brackets is that they offer very much friction between the wire bracket interface rather than the metallic brackets. So space closure will be very slow with respect to ceramic brackets, and hence the treatment time will be prolonged. So ceramic brackets, they are made of aluminum oxide or zirconium oxide. The major advantage is that they offer excellent aesthetics, but it has got so many drawbacks. One is that it is extremely brittle. Second is that if you try to compensate for the brittleness by increasing the size, then the brackets become extremely bulky. And third important thing is that it offers increased friction compared to your metal brackets. So the treatment time will be prolonged. Now, plastic brackets, they are made of polycarbonate, or can be a modified form of polycarbonate. Now, the advantage of the plastic bracket is that it is aesthetic because the color is more or less familiar to your tooth structure. So that is the only advantage of plastic brackets, and they are made up of polycarbonate or a modified form of polycarbonate. Now we have seen the brackets based on the type of the material which is used in their composition, like metal, ceramic and plastic brackets. Now these metal brackets, they can be either bonded to your tooth structure or they can be welded to a band. So depending upon the type of attachment to the tooth structure, their designs will be vary. So for bondable brackets, the bondable brackets are bonded to the tooth structure making use of a composite. So they will have a mesh or grooves that helps in interlocking with the adhesive used, that is your composites. Whereas weldable brackets, they are welded to metallic bands which are placed on the tooth structure. So these weldable brackets will have a metal flange, so that flange can be welded to the band. So the structure of these brackets will be different, that is the part where the brackets attach to the tooth, it will be different for weldable and bondable brackets. So please look at the picture. This picture is actually showing a bondable bracket. You can see that there is a groove or there is a meshwork on the bonding surface, so that helps in increasing the retention with the adhesive. Whereas weldable brackets, this attachment surface will be relatively flat, there won't be grooves, but rather there will be an extension or a flange on the either side of the brackets, so that flange can be welded to your band. So Optiflex arch wires. So we have seen the conventional arch wires like beta titanium stainless steel wires, nickel titanium wires in the chapter dealing with biomechanics and orthodontics. So let's talk about the latest innovation in arch wire, which is Optiflex arch wires developed by Telas in 1992. So these arch wires, they have a composition. There is an outermost coating which is made up of nylon. Inside, beneath that, there is a cladding of silicon resin. So this silicon resin cladding protects this core from moisture and gives strength, and there is a core made up of the silicon dioxide which produces the force for moving the teeth. So please look at the picture. You can see that in an Optiflex arch wire there are three layers. The innermost core, which is made up of the silicon dioxide, which provides the strength that is needed for the tooth movement. Then you have a cladding made of silicon resin which protects the core from moisture, and there is an outermost nylon coating that gives the aesthetic appearance. So apart from the aesthetic advantage offered by Optiflex arch wires, they are also having high resilience property. But the drawback of this arch wire is that they cannot accept a sharp bend. So we cannot give any loops or any V-bend or any other sharp bends in case of an Optiflex arch wire. And also we cannot solder and give any attachments also to this arch wires. So these are the drawbacks of the Optiflex arch wire. Please note the composition of the arch wire, since it's a very recent advancement, or it's a advancement in the field of arch wires. It's extremely important that you remember the composition. You have a silicon dioxide core, then you have a cladding of silicon resin and outermost nylon coating, and it was developed by Telas in 1992. So now let's talk about multi-stranded arch wires. So multi-stranded arch wires, as the name suggests, it has got multiple strands of different arch wires of different dimension, not a single dimension but rather different dimensions. So actually the purpose of using a multi-stranded arch wire is that in the initial stages of fixed orthodontic treatment, you need arch wires of higher flexibility, because the most of the time the tooth will be having some crowding or malalignment. So it is always preferable to use wires of less dimensions to provide increased flexibility. But the problem is, as the wires become very thin, they do not offer adequate strength. So you cannot maintain the arch form or the arch integrity. So to combine the properties of flexibility as well as maintaining the adequate strength, many orthodontists prefer the use of multi-stranded arch wires or coaxial arch wires. So in that you will use wires of thinner dimensions. So they will be twisted together. So this twisting of this arch wire actually increases the strength of this arch wire but helps to maintain the increased flexibility. So we are able to achieve the dual purpose. We can have increased flexibility in the initial stages of the treatment. Also, we are not compromising the strength of the arch wire. So these arch wires were very prominent or very commonly used before the advent of the nickel titanium wires. But with the advent of the nickel titanium wires, the use of the multi-stranded arch wires are relatively less, but still you should be able to understand what is a multi-stranded arch wire. These are made up of number of thin wires which are twisted together, and the advantage is that they exhibit increased flexibility. So after brackets and arch wires, an important component in fixed orthodontics is the use of elastics. So by elastics you find a lot of applications. You can use the E-chain, elastic modules, elastic ligatures. So elastics actually find a lot of application in fixed orthodontics. They are actually made of latex rubber, and the force applied by these elastics depends upon their diameter. So just like what we have seen in arch wires, the force applied by the elastics also depends upon the diameter of the elastic component used. So one application of elastics is the use of E-chains. So please look at the picture. I hope most of you are familiar with this elastic chains or E-chains, and these are made up of synthetic polyurethane. Now, apart from elastics which are used to tie the arch wire or just to close the spaces and everything, apart from this, the another component which is useful in orthodontics is ligature wires. So ligature wires again helps in holding the arch wire to your bracket slots. So please look at the picture. I hope you can recognize that lateral incisor is being tied, that bracket, that arch wire in the lateral incisor is being tied to the bracket by using a ligature wire. So these ligature wires, they are made up of soft stainless wire, and please note the dimension of this ligature wire, which is extremely important. It is 009 to 011 inches. So that is extremely very thin soft stainless steel wire which are used as ligature wire with a dimension of 0.009 to 0.011 inches. Now we have a look into various fixed appliances techniques. So first briefly we will mention about the major milestones in the development of fixed appliance therapy. In 1728 it was Pierre Foucault who first devised the first orthodontic device to expand the dental arch, and then Edward H. Ankle, who is considered as the father of orthodontics, he introduced the E-arch or expansion arch in the late 1800s, and later in 1912 the again Ankle introduced to the pin and tube appliance, and in 1922 Ankle introduced to the ribbon arch appliances. So these are one of the few major milestones in the development of fixed appliance therapy. So we have seen a brief history or the major milestones in the development of fixed appliance therapy. Now we will look at the appliance mechanotherapy in the major appliance techniques. The first one we are discussing is the edgewise appliance. So we have already seen that E.H. Ankle has developed E-arch, then pin and tube appliance, and then ribbon arch appliance, and the last contribution of his to orthodontics was the development of edgewise appliance, which was a very path-breaking revolution. So he devised this appliance technique in 1928, where he developed a metal bracket with a rectangular slot. So this rectangular slot means it will have two dimensions. One will be your length and the other will be your breadth. So in this case the dimensions were O22 into O28. So in two dimensions there is a rectangular slot to which a rectangular wire of the same dimension, that is 22-28 dimension of rectangular arch wire can be inserted. So this type of technique is called as edgewise technique. So this unique feature or the advantage of using this rectangular arch wire in a rectangular slot is that it provides a better control of the tooth movement in all three planes of space. So there is a good control over the tooth movement when you are inserting a rectangular arch wire into a rectangular slot. Now he described the use of an ideal arch wire with incorporated bends. The bends will be of three orders: first order, second order and third order. So this rectangular slot with rectangular arch wire with bends incorporated into the arch wire will help to control the tooth movement in all three planes of the space. So that is the appliance philosophy of Ankel's edgewise appliance. We will have a look into the what is meant by a first order, second order and third order bends in the upcoming slides. But keep in mind that Ankel devised this technique in 1928 when he introduced a rectangular slotted brackets which can receive a rectangular wire of dimension O22 into O28. So this technique was called as edgewise appliance therapy. Now, another major appliance technique which was widely prevalent in orthodontics before the straight wire appliance was the Beggs appliance, which was introduced by Raymond Bug. He modified the Ankel's ribbon arch technique and introduced the light wire differential force technique. So, in this light wire differential force technique, he is making use of the tipping of the teeth rather than the bodily movement of the teeth, and also he developed or introduced the use of high strength stainless steel arch wires which are called as A.J. Wilcock wire or Australian wire, which is heat treated and cold drawn arch wires. So they are called as Australian wire or A.J. Wilcock wire, which is used in the Beggs technique. And along with this arch wire, he introduced a number of auxiliaries and springs to achieve the desired tooth movement. So Beggs technique, which was developed by Raymond Begg, it's a modification of Ankel's ribbon arch technique. And please look at the picture. Here it is a vertical slot. It's not a horizontal slot or a horizontal rectangular slot as we have seen in the previous edgewise technique. Whereas in Beggs appliance, it is actually a vertical slot, and also it is making use of a light wire differential technique with special arch wires which were called as Australian wires or A.J. Wilcock wires. Now, according to Beggs or Beggs technique, the orthodontic treatment is carried out in three different stages. So, the first stage is concerned with your alignment correction. That is, you correct the crowding, spacing, rotations and achieving an edge-to-edge anterior bite. So, that is, you correct the deep bite in such cases. So, stage 1 is concerned with the alignment and bite opening. Now the second stage, what we do is, if there is after the correction of the malalignment, if there are any extraction spaces remaining, these spaces will be closed while maintaining the corrections we have achieved in the stage 1. And in the final stage, which is stage 3, you carry out the uprighting and torquing movements so as to achieve the correct axial inclination of the teeth. So you bring about the desired torquing. Torquing movements means your root movement and uprighting movements so that the teeth will be in a normal axial inclination. So these are the three stages concerned with the Beggs appliance therapy. The first one is your alignment and bite opening stage. Second stage is the closure of extraction spaces, and third stage is the uprighting and torquing stage. So we have already seen as edgewise appliance, which was introduced by Ankel, where you are inserting a rectangular arch wire into a rectangular slot with incorporated bends, first order, second order and third order bends, which are incorporated into the arch wire. Now this was modified by Lawrence F. Andrews, and he developed straight wire appliance. So how he modified the edgewise appliance to a straight wire appliance is that here you are incorporating all your first order, second order and third order bends into the brackets. So the brackets are programmed so as to give the first order, second order and third order bends, and the wire will remain the straight. So there is no need for any complex wire bending in straight wire appliance. So that is the terminology itself indicates straight wire, because all the bends are pre-programmed and inserted into the brackets. So that is why this this appliance is called as pre-adjusted edgewise appliance. So it borrows the philosophy of the edgewise appliance from Ankel's edgewise appliance, but instead of the complex wire bendings which was proposed by Ankel, Lawrence F. Andrews already pre-programmed all these bends into the bracket. So hence the straight wire appliance is also called as pre-adjusted edgewise appliance. So all these times when we were discussing about the edgewise as well as your straight wire appliances, we were talking about the first order, second order and third order bends. So you might be confused, that is, what is exactly a first order bend meant by. So first order bends, which are also called as in-out bend, which is actually to compensate for the differences in the buccolingual prominence of the teeth. So basically this happens when one teeth is like a little bit lingually placed, or one of those teeth is more buccally placed. So as to compensate for these differences in inclination and to bring them into a line of occlusion, you are giving your first order bends, which are also called as in-out bends. So please look at the picture. You can see that in this picture that lateral incisor is a little bit instanding. So you are giving a first order bend between your central and your canine so as to bring the lateral incisor outside. So that is why it is called as in-out bend. Now the second order bends are given for the correction of the mesiodistal axial inclination. So again look at the picture which is marked as 2. You can see that central incisor is slightly distally tipped. So as to correct the abnormality in its axial inclination, you will be giving a second order bend. Now third order bends are called as torquing bends, and that is to correct the buccolingual inclination. So this buccolingual inclinations can be corrected by a third order bends, and this is given by twisting the arch wire. So actually these bends were suggested by Ankel in the edgewise appliances, where all the bends were incorporated. First order, second order and third order bends were incorporated into the arch wire. But Lawrence F. Andrews modified this technique such a way that this bands or the first order, second order or third order needs were incorporated or pre-programmed into the brackets. So there is no need for any wire bending, but rather the brackets are pre-programmed in such a way that once the wire will be inserted, they will automatically give the required first order, second order and third order bends. Now, as long as the people's demand for aesthetics will be there will be more and more innovations in orthodontics to give a better aesthetic treatment. So one such innovation was the lingual technique of orthodontic treatment introduced by Craven Kurz in 1976. Because so far we have seen all the techniques, edgewise, begs and straight wire appliances. In everywhere the brackets are placed labially on the teeth. So that offers so much aesthetic disadvantages to the patients. So the people will be demanding techniques or methods where they will have more aesthetic treatment options. So one such technique was developed by Craven Kurz in 1976, where the brackets are placed on the lingual surface of the teeth. So definite advantage of this technique is that it is offering an aesthetic treatment, and also in this lingual technique the begs appliance as well as edgewise principles can be employed. But a major drawback of this technique is that there is poor access to your palatal surface, as well as there is a difficulty in speech and maintaining the oral hygiene. And apart from the brackets which are placed on the lingual surface, there is a difference in the arch form. The arch form is not the same as as on the labial aspect as on the lingual aspect, because the molars and premolars will have a prominent lingual surface, whereas the anterior teeth is only having a prominent cinculum area. So this necessitates a need for a difference in arch wire. So in lingual technique, it is actually a mushroom shaped arch wire which is used, which was developed by Kinia Fujita. So this mushroom shape is due to the greater prominence or bulk of the posterior teeth on the lingual aspect. So the mushroom arch wire is employed in lingual technique, which was developed by Kinia Fujita, and the lingual technique as such was developed by Craven Kurz in 1976. So whatever technique you are employing, like maybe you choosing the edgewise technique or Beggs technique, so your straight wire appliance in fixed appliances, the stages in treatment will be definitely through three stages. The first stage is your leveling and alignment stage, where you will correct all the malalignments like your spacing, crowding, rotations, and everything. And also you try to reduce the debite. So that is why it is called as leveling and alignment stage. Now the second stage is the overbite reduction stage, and third stage is your overjet reduction and space closure stages. So the first stage is your leveling and alignment stage, the second stage is your overbite reduction stage, and third stage is your overjet reduction and space closure stage. So for space closure, there are two mechanics which are employed in the fixed appliance therapy. One is your friction mechanics. So friction mechanics is also called as sliding mechanics, where you can use an elastomeric arch wire or elastomeric module or any other e-chain so as to close the spaces. Now frictionless mechanics is making use of the loops which are made in the arch wire, and by closing the loops you are trying to bring the space closure. So there are two mechanics for tooth retraction in fixed orthodontic therapy. The one is your friction mechanics, which is also called as your sliding mechanics, and the second one is your frictionless mechanics, where you are making use of the loops so as to achieve space closure. So hereby we are concluding the chapter on removable and fixed appliances. This is a very relatively simple chapter, especially with respect to removable appliances. Most of these things you people have made in your preclinical exercises, so this won't be difficult for you to identify a C clasp or an Adams clasp. But the exam pattern will not be like so relatively simple. In that cases, in real exam, in NEET exam, they will be asking you pictures based on appliances that you don't make conventionally. So it can be your Mills retractor or your high lab elbow with apron spring. So or in fixed appliances you should be able to differentiate between a vertical slot bracket and a horizontal slot bracket, also able to identify any elastomeric chain and Optiflex arch wires as well as brackets. So brackets, in that also the latest advancements like your ceramic brackets and plastic brackets, what's the composition of the brackets. So such kinds of questions can be expected. So please try to answer the question, and please go through the images again and again. As I mentioned, you may not get confused between a C clasp or any or Adams clasp, but you should be able to identify how a Mills retractor will look like, how a high lab elbow with an apron spring will look like, how an Optiflex arch wire will look like compared to your conventional arch wires. So such kinds of things you should keep in mind. Also be thorough with the second order, first order and third order bends. So please try to answer the questions and feel free to ask the doubts.